Hi everybody, today we're going to make all three of the spring mini pillows from the March 2026 Hoop Studio subscription kit. I already filmed an unboxing for this. I have all my fabrics prepped for all three projects. I opened the pillows yesterday so they would have a chance to puff up overnight. There's also some vacuum packed fiber fill. I opened that last night as well and kind of stretch it and let it fluff. I have all my threads pulled. I'll show you my thread colors. You're going to need wash away embroidery stabilizer, light mesh cutaway stabilizer, and fusible backing. All three of our projects can be made in a 5x7 hoop. We're going to start with the Hello Spring mini pillow. This uses the light mesh cutaway in a 5x7 hoop. I'm going to get my hoop loaded. You want to make sure you take your two back fabric pieces, fold them in half widthwise, wrong sides together, and press. And then you want to put your fusible on the back of the front fabric and the medallion fabric. Here's everything I have prepped for this pillow. Here are the two pieces of back fabric. I already folded them in half and pressed them. They've been lightly starched and pressed. I use Faultless Heavy Finish Spray Starch. I use a light spray, not a heavy spray, because if you saturate the fabric too much, it's really going to shrink and you don't want to end up short on fabric. I have my fusible on the back of the medallion fabric and on the back of the front fabric. I also have my piece of project batting ready to go. I'll show you my thread colors really quick for this project. They're given as glide colors in the instructions. I do have white glide. All the other colors I have here, these numbers that start with S, are called Sim Thread. I ordered them on Amazon years ago. Still working through them. They work great. Let me show you those colors. We have the glide white. For linen, I picked this color, celery, viridian green. It almost looks like a Christmas green. If any of the colors don't look like they're going to work as I work through my project, I change them. If that happens, I'll let you know. Sunshine, pumpkin seed, and marmalade. And some of these colors are used throughout. I'll go ahead and show you all the rest of the colors while we're here. For the daffodil pillow, we use some of the same colors. We use the white and the celery. And then we're adding in a buttermilk, a baby blue, and a mango smoothie. These are my colors for that. So you have the buttermilk, the baby blue, and the mango smoothie. There's the numbers for those. And then for our goose, we add in three more colors. We have our white, our pumpkin seed, and marmalade again. And then we add in smoke, spice brown, and rust. There's the smoke, the spice brown, and the rust. The smoke is a Sim Thread. The spice brown is Floriani. And the one I picked for rust is actually called New Bro Thread, another Amazon purchase years ago. I got a lot of these colors for a good price and they're working really well. I'm going to keep using them until they're all gone. I'm going to load some light mesh cutaway into my 5x7 hoop. We're going to start on our Hello Spring pillow. A couple other things I've got ready and over at the machine. My Kimberbell paper tape. My machine currently has a Schmetz 8012 super non-stick needle on it. I'm going to go ahead and leave that on for now. A regular 7511 embroidery needle will work fine as well for this project, whatever you have. And I've got my snips and my double curve applique scissors. I'll make sure the scissors are linked below. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. I've got my instructions here on my folding metal book stand. I'll make sure there's information on that linked below. I have my home sewn needle minder right here. This is great on a folding metal book stand. It helps hold your instructions, and as you're working through your project, it can help keep your place. Let's go ahead and load our file for the Hello Spring pillow. This one right here, it's just one file. When you bring it up, hit set and embroidery, and we're ready to go. The first few steps are your fabric prep that we already went over, loading your hoop and loading your file. Let's start our stitch out. You want to load the color linen on your machine. We're going to start by stitching out our batting placement line. Your batting, I've got a little piece of tape on it. You want to cover the placement line. Make sure you've got all those lines completely covered. Tape that down, double check. We're going to stitch the batting tack down line, and then after it's tacked down, trim everything that's outside of the tack down line. Once you've got the extra trimmed away, you're going to stitch out the front placement line. Next, you want to grab your front fabric. I've got a little piece of tape up top just in case. It does say this is directional, and to place it so your stripes run like this, top to bottom. Honestly, I didn't even see that until after I cut my fabric. I happened to cut it the right way. If you cut it with the lines going this way, it's a pillow. Don't worry about it. It does not matter. This should have fusible on the back. Go ahead and cover those placement lines. Then we're going to tack it down. This is all tacked down. I want to remove my tape. You don't trim it at this time. We're going to go ahead and stitch the background quilting, and that's still in the colored linen. I'm stitching out the quilting. I had a thread break already. Now I have another thread break. It seems to be happening when it's turning, as it's coming up, and then it makes an abrupt turn, and then the thread snaps. So just be aware if you're having a thread break problem. Let me show you what to do in case that happens, if that's never happened to you before. The first thing I do is rethread my needle, and then we need to go back over to our screen. The crosshairs show me where it is on the design. It's currently outside of any of the area that's going to show. I don't really need to back it up, but I'm going to show you how to back it up in case you need to. Needle minus plus. You can go forward or backward by 1, 10, hundreds, or thousands, or by a whole color. I'm going to back it up by, let's say 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's right about where the thread broke, and hit OK. And now I'm ready to put the foot down and continue the stitch out. The quilting is all stitched out. You probably saw my hand right here, since I knew that as it was coming toward the top and then it would turn, that's where my thread was breaking. Before it got to the top, I just stopped it, and then I would restart it, which makes it go slow for the first few stitches, and then it kept going again. No more thread breaks after that. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the medallion placement line. It's going to stitch out an oval. It has us doing that in linen. You want to grab your medallion fabric, and it should have the fusible on the back. Look for that oval. Make sure you've got it completely covered. I'm going to add a piece of tape to hold that in place, and then we're going to stitch the tack down line. That still is in linen. You can go ahead and remove your tape and then trim away any of the extra fabric outside that tack down line. We're going to switch to the color white and stitch out the medallion decorative outline. And looking at my machine, this is a long stitch out. Make sure you've got a full or relatively full bobbin. If you've got some ironing to do for a project, or maybe some cutting for your next Kimberbell project, and you can keep an eye or ear out for your machine and work on something else while this is going, now's a good time. If you don't have anything else to work on, go get some cookies and then sit down and watch it stitch out. Let's switch to white, and I'm going to stitch out the medallion decorative outline. That was a long stitch out, but it looks great. It looks like lace. Really nice detail. We're going to switch to the Viridian. I have a really bright green here picked out for this. We're going to stitch the stems and leaves fills. As I'm looking at my colors, they're pretty bright. I did use a glide color card to match, but sometimes I go a little bit brighter than the card. So if my colors look brighter than yours, if you're using glide or you have different colors, it's going to look just fine. We're going to switch to Sunshine and stitch out the flower 1 and flower 2 fills. Next is Pumpkin Seed. We're going to stitch out flower 3 fill. Switch to the color Celery, and we're going to stitch out the word hello. The word hello has stitched. I think I might have a couple of jump threads. You can check now, you can check later. I do. I can see one right here, and I think here, here, and up here. I'm going to go ahead and trim those now while I'm thinking about it. Those are all trimmed. We're going to switch to the color Marmalade and stitch out the word Spring. I've got one jump thread right here I want to get rid of before our next step. You want to grab your backing fabric. It has the stripes running up and down on these two. I happen to do that correctly. Honestly, wasn't even paying attention. You're going to place them with the folds in the center. So the open pieces at the top and the bottom. It says to extend the open edge at least 1/4 of an inch beyond that outside stitch line. I'm going to lay that down. And then same for this. And they should overlap about 1 inch in the center. That does look good. Double check, make sure you've got all your lines covered. I'm going to put this on the table and double check and show you how to tape this. Here I am at the table. My sewing machine is on an antique wooden table. This part pops up, so we can set that there. Open edge at the top. Make sure that it overlaps that top line by about 1/4 of an inch, just like that. I can see this stitch line, I'm overlapping there, this stitch line, I'm overlapping there, and then same thing at the bottom, open edge, down here, overlapping about 1/4 of an inch beyond that line, and then these will overlap in the center, and it shows the bottom overlapping the top. It doesn't really matter, you just need to watch your machine during the next step. We want to grab some tape, full piece of tape right here across the middle, like that, and then we want to tape the 4 corners. Here's what that should look like. There's your full piece of tape right across the center, and all the corners are taped. Going to put this back on the machine, leave the color Marmalade, and we're going to stitch the final outline. It's going to go all the way around. Watch your machine. You've got a couple little bumps here. You want to stop it if it gets caught on anything. We're done at the machine. Let's grab our hoop and head over to the table. You want to go ahead and remove the tape, and your stitching goes over the tape. What I like to do is just use my fingernail, or if you've got really short fingernails and you don't have a fingernail, just grab something kind of flat to hold that stitching down. That way you're not just ripping your tape and pulling up your stitches. Carefully remove all your tape. If you're like me, you reuse your tape. This is a good piece of tape. I'm going to set this aside for next time. I'm going to go around and remove all my tape. Next, you want to take your project out of the hoop. We want to go ahead and trim 1/4 inch away from this outside stitch line. So I've got a ruler here that has a nice 1/4 inch mark on it. I can put that right on top of the stitch line and then go all the way around the pillow and trim all 4 sides. Everything is trimmed. You can cut the corners to help reduce the bulk before we turn this right side out. After you turn it, if you find that it's still too bulky, you can cut this a little closer, but I would definitely start with that 1/4 inch. That gives you a little bit of room to work. Once you've got the corners cut, you can even trim them a little bit more like this. And then I'm going to flip it. And that makes them even smoother for the turn. Next, you want to flip it right side out, and then you want to poke out the corners. I have what's called a purple Thang, T-H-A-N-G. You can use this to help poke out the corners. It's not very sharp, but you can also use this part right here, or you can use the little square part. Once you've got everything flipped and your corners look how you want them to look, you want to take this over to your iron, press it from the back side, and then we'll put our pillow inside. Grab your little Kimberbell pillow insert and your little pillow, and you need to put the pillow insert into the pillow. I've got pillow inside. I'm just kind of squishing it and shoving the stuffing to the corners. I can never quite get everything all the way into the corners. They're a little flat right at the tips, but otherwise it feels pretty well distributed. Let's have a look. Here is our Hello Spring mini pillow. Wow, that came out great, and that was really easy. This is a great beginner project. Lots of fun. Zero stress, enough time when this was stitching around for a cookie break. Thumbs up for this first mini pillow. Let's go to the next pillow. Next is the Daffodil mini pillow. Light mesh cutaway in your 5x7 hoop again. This pillow has some applique. We've got our yellow felt, and there's also buttons in the kit, but the design has embroidery flowers, so if you're making multiples, or you don't want to use the buttons, you can actually embroider the center of the flowers. Let's head over to the machine. Make sure you folded your back fabric pieces in half widthwise, wrong sides together, press well. You should have fusible backing on the wrong side of the front fabric. We just hooped our light mesh cutaway. Let's load our file. Let's bring up the file. You want to put baby blue on your machine, and we're going to keep this color on the machine up through the background quilting. The first steps we're going to do are going to be the same. We're going to stitch our batting placement line, place the batting, tack it down, and then trim, and then stitch the front placement line. I'll go ahead and run those first few steps together because it's exactly like what we just did, and then we'll pick up right here where we're getting our front fabric ready. Batting is tacked down and trimmed, and we have our front fabric placement line. Go ahead and place your front fabric so it covers the placement line. We're going to stitch the tack down, do not trim, and then stitch the quilting. The background quilting is done, and we're going to do some embroidery. We're going to use the color Buttermilk and stitch out the bud fill. Then we're going to switch to the color Celery and stitch out the stems and leaves fills. This color is a really long stitch out. Make sure you have a full bobbin, and then after that we're going to stitch the leaves detail in white. I'm going to go ahead and run those three together because it's straight embroidery, and then after we stitch out with the white, I'll slow it down and we'll work our way through the applique. My bobbin did run out during that, and I started this one with a full bobbin. Before I shut the camera off, I looked. That was a 27-minute stitch out. Next, we are going to switch to white and stitch out the leaves detail. I know I said I was going to run it all together, but I had to stop and give you a time check on that. The big stitch out is done. We're going to switch to the color Buttermilk, and we're going to stitch out the placement line for the petals fabric. You want to grab your petals felt, cover those placement lines. I've got to get it a little closer to me. They're a little hard to see. It kind of blends in. Make sure it's covered. Add a piece of tape, and then we're going to stitch the tack down. Once you've stitched your tack down, you want to trim everything outside the tack down lines. There isn't going to be a detail stitch around it, so take some extra time. Be careful with your trimming. Make it look how you want it to look. These are both trimmed. We're going to switch to white and stitch out the petals detail. The detail is all stitched out. The next couple stops are for if you're not using the buttons. It says note if using the buttons, skip directions step 21 and 22. I am using the buttons. I did pull this color thread. I think they're calling it Mango Smoothie for the center. I guess I'm not going to use it today. It would have looked good. Maybe something a little more orange might have looked better. Let's go ahead and move through those steps. Needle minus plus, I can use the double down arrow. It'll skip a whole step at a time. I don't need that one or that one. That's what I want to see. That's going to be our final outline. We need to get our two pieces of backing fabric. It does have us stitching this step out in white. I do have white on my machine. Same thing as before, where you put the fold in the middle and you make sure you're a 1/4 inch outside of the stitch lines, then a full piece of tape and taping the corners. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, but I'll show you what mine looks like before we stitch that final outline. Here's what that looks like. Same thing as before, full piece of tape across the center and tape in all of the 4 corners. I'm going to put that back on my machine. I've got the white thread on and we're going to stitch the final outline. Make sure to watch this part just in case it gets caught. we're all done at the machine. We're going to grab our hoop, grab our buttons, and if you're like me, you're going to plug in your glue gun, and we're going to head over to the table. I'm going to be using a Surebonder Cool Shot glue gun today to attach the buttons. I'm going to plug it in now so it'll be ready to go. It is a hot glue gun. It's just not quite as hot as a regular glue gun and nowhere near as hot as my high temperature Surebonder glue gun. You want to go ahead and remove the tape, get your project out of your hoop. Once you've got it out of your hoop, you're going to do the same thing you did last time and go ahead and trim it a 1/4 inch away and then cut the corners. Trim the corners if you like to reduce the bulk. I showed this last time. I'm going to do this the exact same way, so I'll go ahead and do that off camera. So trim and clip your corners. I've got mine all trimmed. I've got my corners trimmed. Same thing again, flip it right side out, use your tool if needed to poke out the corners, give it a press from the back side, make sure it's all looking good, and then we'll go ahead and we'll stuff it and we'll attach our buttons. I've got this pressed. I did cover it with a pressing cloth and press from the front as well as pressing from the back. You'll notice that there's a bit of bulk right here because some of this stitching is caught in the seam, so you kind of have to squish it. Make sure if you press from the front, definitely use a pressing cloth because you've got felt and polyester thread. The next thing we want to do is attach our buttons. You'll notice the buttons aren't the same. You want to pay attention with where you place each of the buttons. There's a great picture here on page 11. I would place them just like the picture. I am going to hot glue instead of hand stitching. If you're hand stitching, just be careful you're only hand stitching through the top, that you don't hand stitch all the way through the back because we have to put in the pillow insert. The first button is the round button, and it kind of has a point on this side. When I look at the picture, they have that point going that way. So we'll go ahead and place that button just like the picture. I'm going to put some glue down right in the center. Make sure I've got enough glue to hold the button, and then as I press it down, it's going to poke up through the holes of the button and almost create what looks like a couple of beads on top of the button. That way I know it's going to hold the button into place. Let me show you that. See how the glue kind of comes out through the holes of the button? This button is not going to fall off. That looks good. Our next button goes like that. And you can see where it goes. There's an empty space for it. You just want to glue that down. I'm actually going to turn that towards me. This one's on a bit of an angle. I want to make sure I get that right. Looks like that. Go ahead and put down our glue. And I'm going to add a little bit extra. It's a big button, so I want to cover the holes and the whole button. And then sort of squish that down. I can see the glue coming up through the holes, a little bit more coming up through one hole than the other. If you don't like the way that that looks, just rub the glue off. Now it's going to be flat and it won't have like the round shape like this button does. It doesn't bother me that one has like glue beads and the other doesn't. That's the difference between the two. Going to give them a double press, make sure everything is in place. It feels good. I can put my hand on the back. I can feel that the glue has cooled. Time to put in our pillow. I'm going to put in the pillow. The reason I'm not taking off the tag is I want to remember where the pillows came from in case I ever need another pillow like that. I don't know if Kimberbell sells the little pillow forms individually, but they're a really cute size. So if I rip off the tag, you know, a couple months from now, I probably will forget that it came in the kit. So go ahead and get your pillow stuffed. Now for this one, since it has buttons, if you want to put it down and squish it, probably put down a towel first. Make sure that you don't accidentally ruin your buttons. So I'm just going to use my hands. It feels pretty good. Let's look at the front. Very cute. Look at that. Love it. And then we have our Hello Spring pillow. How fun. Next we get to make the goose. I'm so excited. It's ridiculous. Let's get our instructions for the goose. For your goose, you want to make sure you're loading wash away stabilizer. Get that in your 5x7 hoop. Make sure you've got your flexi foam, the goose felt, paper tape, the fiber fill, mine's nice and puffy, and the thread colors that you need. Let's head over to the machine and load the file. A quick note on thread colors. For pumpkin seed, I picked this bright orange, and as I'm looking at the goose, I think this is just going to be way too bright. The color I had picked for mango smoothie is this nice sort of soft peachy orange. I'm going to use this color instead for pumpkin seed, and I pulled out my Glide color cardigan, and this matches pretty well. So I'll be using that during the goose stitch out. Let's load the file for our Goose Stuffie. You should have your white thread on your machine, wash away stabilizer, make sure that's what you've got in your hoop. We're going to start out by stitching the base placement line right on the stabilizer. Grab your flexi foam and you want to completely cover that placement line that you just stitched out, and you want to put tape on this. The flexi foam is puffy, it sticks up a bit in your hoop, you don't want it moving around. So get some tape on there, and after you have it taped, we're going to stitch the base tack down line. They do show tape going, like all the way around. Make sure it's secure, keep an eye on it. I'm using little pieces of tape that I've already used during this project, and I always try to reuse my tape. If I can use it several times over, that's great. Let's go ahead and stitch out the base tack down. That did just fine with all my little pieces of tape. You can go ahead and remove your tape and then trim away the flexi foam that's outside of that tack down line. Looks like we've got a good sized piece here. I like to save these little pieces. You never know when you might want to use them for a project. I've got that trimmed. I got a little bit over the stitch line here. You can see this part is not tacked down, but we're going to be covering this with felt and tacking it down. It's going to be fine. If you ever accidentally cut your stabilizer, grab a piece of paper tape, put it on the back, press it down really good, and you can keep going. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the goose placement line and trimming tab. You want to grab the goose felt, make sure you completely cover those lines, tape it in place, and then we're going to stitch the tack down. I'm actually going to take this off my machine and set it on the table and add some tape. I've got my tape across the top, some pieces on the side and across the bottom here. We're going to stitch out the goose tack down and trimming line, but we're not going to trim it at this time. So just go ahead and stitch out that line, and then we'll go to the next step. Going to switch to the color pumpkin seed. That's the thread I just talked about at the beginning. Going to use that and stitch out the feet and the beak. That looks really good. That was a good call switching that color. The other one would have been much too bright. We're going to switch to rust, and we're going to stitch out the inner bow fill, and then after that switch to marmalade and stitch out the outer bow fill. I'll go ahead and run those two steps together. The goose is looking good. Next we're going to switch to spiced brown. We're going to stitch out the eye fill, and then after that switch to smoke and stitch out the wing detail. I'll go ahead and run those two together. Next we're going to switch to white. It's going to stitch out a little bit of detail here on the beak, and then the sewing guideline. Looks like that's going to go right about here. I'll go ahead and run those two steps together. They're both in white. Those two steps have stitched out. I'm going to pull my little goose off the machine, put him on the table here, and we're going to put some felt on the back. I want to flip it over to the back, and I'm probably going to go ahead and cut these dark threads that I can see. The rest of them I'm not worried about because we're going to be putting a piece of white felt on the back. I don't think I'm going to see the threads through it. Felt's pretty thick, but just in case, we'll cut the dark threads. That is all done. We're going to take our other piece of goose felt, make sure that there's nothing stuck underneath, no dog hair, cat hair, dark threads, anything like that. Cover the goose, and then we want to add tape to this. When you add tape to this, don't push your project down. You've got space here. You want to make sure you support it underneath when you're pressing on the tape. What I'm going to do is grab a piece of tape. I'm going to tape right here. This I can actually push right against the hoop. That's good. I'm going to double check, make sure everything's covered easily. Now I'm going to put my hand underneath it and just kind of press it down. And then we want to add tape to the sides and the bottom. The sides, it's going to go right on the hoop again. I'm not worried about that. When we do our bottom, I would do the same thing. Go ahead and tape it. I'm pressing it against the hoop, but put your hand underneath, support that stabilizer. I'm just squeezing it between my fingers. You can also put a towel underneath. I'm sitting at the table. I don't feel like getting up to go get a towel, so I'm supporting with my hand. I'm going to put 2 more pieces of tape on the side. This is all taped down really well. You want to flip it back over, put it on your machine, and we're going to stitch the final outline. It's going to leave an opening for the stuffing. We're all done at the machine. Let's take our goose over to the table. You want to remove all your tape from the front and from the back. And once you do that, you can take your project out of the hoop. Once you've got your project out of your hoop and you've removed the tape, you can trim directly on the trimming line stitched in. Machine step 4. It's actually not picture number 4, it's machine step 4. I'll show that to you because this confused me. Do not trim the tab along the gooseneck opening. It's a raw edge finish. Machine step 4 is on page 14 right here. It's actually picture number 9. Machine step 4, goose tack down and trimming line. That's where it wants you to trim, but you don't trim off the tab. So when you get to this part here, you go around the tab and then all the way around the goose. I'm going to get a good pair of scissors, get my readers, and sit down and take my time and trim all along the outermost stitch line, and again going around, leaving that tab. I'm going to do that off camera so I'm not having to work around and underneath a tripod. So I will do that and bring it back and show you what it looks like. Here's the goose all trimmed. Something else I noticed about the instructions, right about now is probably when you want to dissolve your water soluble stabilizer. I would do that before you stuff it and stitch it closed. I don't see that in the instructions. If you want to dissolve it, you can get a Q-tip or a wet sponge brush and just kind of rub it along the edge. I really don't see it when I'm looking at it. I just think I'm going to skip that altogether. And if you don't have wash away, if you just have light mesh cutaway, I think you can make this project with that. It'll be fine. You might see a little bit of stabilizer right between the felt, but nobody's going to notice that. The next step is to stuff the goose. Another thought, this is made with flexi foam. It looks cute just like this. This would make a great Christmas ornament without even stuffing it. But if you want to go ahead and stuff it, there's a tiny opening right there. So you'll have to put the stuffing in a little bit at a time and just do it in little pieces. So let's grab some stuffing. You don't want to try and shove the whole thing in. There's more than enough. You want to pull off little bits. Get it nice and full of air, nice and fluffy, and you're probably going to need to get something to help get the stuffing all the way in. You know, I've got pretty big hands, but I can only get about that far. So you put a little bit in at a time. And then go ahead and push that in. You can actually just use like a ballpoint pen, just like that, and go ahead and put that in. It does add some dimension to it. It is going to make it nice and poofy. It makes it more like a stuffed animal. Without the stuffing, it really does look like a Christmas ornament. I think it would make a great Christmas ornament. You could even make it a little bit smaller if you have a really tiny little tree. Maybe you've got one where you hang your little tiny embroidery or a cross stitch or needlework, or those punch needle ornaments that Kimberbell came out with. I have a video for that on my channel. I'll link that below for you guys. Go ahead and stuff the goose little by little. Just tear off those small pieces. Take your time and try to make sure it's evenly distributed. You know, give it a little squish every now and then. Make sure you're not missing a part. I didn't get enough in the tail. Move it around and fill the whole goose. I'm just about done stuffing. One thing to watch for is right here. right at the neck. You see that? Make sure that you get that area nice and stuffed so that you don't have a floppy goose neck. Make sure that you get everything nice and even and stuffed before you get ready to fold these in and stitch this closed. I think the goose is pretty well stuffed. You can sort of feel, make sure there's no flat spots. Again, make sure you've got that neck area right here nice and stuffed so his head doesn't wobble. Once you're satisfied with the stuffing, we can fold these in like that. I think it also says you can trim them. I wouldn't trim them. I would just fold them in. And then we have to stitch that closed. I hate hand stitching. I'm just not good at it, but I don't think this is something that I can put on my sewing machine and run the stitch and have it look good. I'm going to have to hand stitch this one closed. Let's get a needle and thread and talk about hand stitching the opening closed. To do the hand stitching, I've got a needle threader. I've got some needles here in this needle case. I'm going to use the Glide White because that's what we've been using throughout the project. Pair of scissors, and most importantly, I've got my readers. I'm going to pull a needle out. You can see I have different sizes. You don't want to use a really big needle for this. A lot of hand stitching needles, hand quilting needles, they've got the really tiny eye because they're a skinny needle. That's part of the reason why I don't like hand stitching. I think I'll just grab this one. I'll put these away. I got this, I think it's called an antique needle case a couple years ago. I believe it was in a sew sampler box from Fat Quarter Shop. Really pretty. I'll look. If they have it, I'll link it below for you. I'm going to grab a length of thread longer than I need because I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to do what's called a loop start. It's something that I do on cross stitch rather than knotting at the end. I find this a little bit easier. I'm going to get both of my ends even. Got the two ends of my thread, and here's my thread, and at the end you've got a loop. I folded the thread in half. Here's the two ends. Needle. If you've never used a needle threader before, the wire goes through the eye of the needle like that, and then you've got a much bigger space to thread versus trying to thread the eye of the needle, which is really hard with needles like this. I'm going to pull that through so you can see you've got your two ends here and then the rest of the thread. Pull your needle threader back through. I want to leave a long enough of a tail so it doesn't fall out. I'm going to grab Mr. Goose? Yeah, I guess he's Mr. Goose. He's got a little bow tie. Make sure this is nice and flat. And I want to try and keep the stitching inside. And that's where I struggle with hand stitching, and I just kind of lose my patience with it. But I'll show you how I try to do this anyway. I'm going to grab, this is the tab. It's not the outside, it's that tab. I'm going to try and go underneath. Actually, I may need to go before the tab. I'm going to go on the inside, and I'm going to go up, and I'm going a little bit past where the opening starts. I'm going to pull that through, but not all the way through. I want to watch for that loop at the end of my thread. There's that loop. I'm going to put my needle through the loop, like that. And then when you pull, see how the threads are running through the loop? You don't need to make a knot. It just catches on itself. I do that when I cross stitch. If you cross stitch, you usually use 2 strands, at least if you're on, 14, 16 count. Those are the counts I like to stitch on. I'm not a tiny count stitcher. I can't see it. Try to go inside on both sides. I think they call it a whip stitch. I need to turn him around. Inside. I'm just not very good at this. If you have a better way to do this, please do that. Make sure to pull that all the way through. And now on the other side. On the inside. Like that. I'm not going through the top on either side. And pull. I think my stitches are too far apart already. That's another thing that I kind of struggle with when I do the whip stitch. It's just not my strong suit. We'll just do the best we can. If I don't like the way it looks, I'll glue it shut. Just for some extra security. This is going to go back and forth and hit on this side. And pull. Polyester thread's really slippery. And that's it. I'm going to do this the whole way down. So a little bit on each side. Just a little bit. And then the next side. Some people are really good at this, and I think they can go like underneath here and then grab the other side at the same time. So your needle's running through both sides. That works as well. So under one side. I just have a hard time with hand stitching. And then the other side. And pull it nice and tight. When you look at this, you are clearly going to be able to tell that I hand stitched this close. It's not going to look really nice and neat. Again, not really my strong suit. So if you've got a better way to hand stitch it close, do it that way. I'm going to go ahead and sit down, probably actually grab my magnifying lamp and hold this real tight and stitch it the rest of the way. I'm all done with my hand stitching. You want to try and hide the knot on the inside. That's another thing I struggle with. I'm not quite sure with like the quote proper way to do that. What I'm going to do is go down and up. Uh-oh, I've got my thread around the goose's neck. Let's fix that. There we go. So we went down and up, and I'm going to go through the thread like that, through the loop, pull it tight, and then I need to make a knot. Here I don't think I can get away with not making a knot. So we'll go ahead and knot that. I'm going to put my finger on it as I pull the thread so that the knot is as close to the bottom as possible. And I'm going to knot it one more time. Hold that. And then you want to bury it so you can put your needle into your project and then just back out. I'll show you why. So in and out. Okay. I'm going to take the needle off. I don't know how many times I've poked myself already. I'm going to pull it kind of tight. You can see how it's starting to gather a little bit. And I'm going to trim it right there. Whoop! Flying goose. And now the loose ends of the thread are inside, and the knot is pulled inside as well. Overall, it's a fairly forgiving project. I'm going to go around, check for any fuzzies from the water-soluble stabilizer, check for any loose threads, and then we'll get a final look at our goose. Here he is in all his glory. We've got our little Goose Stuffie. How did yours turn out? Make sure to leave me a comment, let me know. I'm going to line up all the projects. We'll get a look at everything. I've got a ton of stuffing left over. I can make at least one more goose, probably two. We've got all of our pillows done for the Spring Mini Pillows Hoop Studio, March 2026. We've got our Hello Spring, the daffodils with the cute little buttons, and the fantastic, despite me having to hand stitch something closed, Goose Stuffie. Love it. Really, really cute. This came out really nice. I think I'm going to take all of these and put them out front by my door. I have my March applique of the month runner out there, the one with the bunny on it, and I have some spring and Easter cross stitch on display. This is going to make a great addition to that display. If you've got a tier tray or one of those dough bowls, this is perfect. Thank you for stitching these with me. Coming up is going to be the Sippin' on Sunshine feature quilt. I'm waiting for my fabric kit. My kit is coming from a local quilt shop, and they did get notice that the fabric kits are on their way to them, so as soon as they get the fabric kit, they're shipping me a kit courtesy of Kimberbell. We're also going to be working on the May home sewn tiling scene. I already have a video posted where I step through pulling the fabric and threads for this, and I'll have another video soon for the Perfectly Pieced 2026 mystery quilt. It'll also serve as your block tutorial. I'll make sure the playlists are linked below for the Perfectly Pieced, Home Sewn, Hoop Studio, and Applique of the Month. When Sippin' on Sunshine arrives, I'll start a new playlist for that project. Thank you again for making these projects with me. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. It would make the Goose very happy. Let me know how your projects turn out. Leave me a comment below, and I'll see you next time.